Good evening. I am Anitra Steele, Chair of the Forums Committee. Welcome to our forum for Missouri's United States House of Representatives District 5. This forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Kansas City, Jackson, Clay, and Platte counties. The forum will be recorded and available on the League's webpage, lwvkc.org, and on YouTube. The League of Women Voters is a trusted grassroots, nonpartisan organization whose members do the hands on work to safeguard democracy. While we neither endorse nor oppose candidates or political parties, we are directly involved with sharing the important issues. Our mission is to empower voters and defend our democracy. We envision a democracy where every citizen has the knowledge, the right, the desire, and the confidence to participate. Our membership is open to everyone. I'd like you to know the other League members volunteering with me. Stephanie Revels is our timekeeper, and our Zoom is monitored by Lenny Constance. The public has sent in the questions via the League's website, lwvkc.org. Tonight, we welcome our moderator, Mary Sanchez. Welcome, Mary. Take it away.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you for everyone for logging in to listen and to our candidates. I'm delighted to join you for this forum for Missouri's District 5, or I almost want to say Missouri's new District 5. This is definitely a high-profile race, so we'll certainly want to hear everything you have to say. Just to explain, each U.S. representative is elected to a 2-year term serving the people of a specific congressional district. Representatives introduce bills and resolutions, offer amendments, and serve on committees. The House has several powers assigned exclusively to it, including the power to initiate revenue bills, impeach federal officials, and elect the president in the case of an electoral college tie. Tonight, we'll hear from the candidates running for Missouri's 5th congressional district. Forums last approximately 90 minutes. This one may go a little bit shorter, just the number of candidates is a little bit lower this evening than who could attend. I'll ask each candidate the same question, selected from those submitted by the public. The order of candidate responses has been determined by a random rotation. And again, that's going to shift a little bit this evening because we have 2 people here for our forum. Each candidate will be given 90 seconds to respond to each question and 2 minutes for a closing statement. So another kind of rule. So all of the candidates running for these seats have been invited. The incumbent, Emmanuel Cleaver, is not able to join us this evening. We welcome the candidates participating in tonight's forum. Candidates, please answer the question asked and stick to the topic. There will be no rebuttals, but you can go back to an issue during your 2-minute closing remarks. Okay, so let us get started. First question. We'll send this one to Brett Huffmeyer. Okay, and it is kind of to introduce. Please introduce yourself and tell us what qualifies you to represent District 5 residents in Congress.
Sure. So my name is Brett Huffmeyer. I'm running for the 5th Congressional District of Missouri for U.S. Congress. And, I'm running in this race mainly because I got really tired of hearing politicians answer questions ambiguously. I think that this country has gotten really tired of that. I think they've gotten used to people answering questions without giving real policy specifics. And I am here to do that. That's something that I've always felt sort of intellectual about. I've always kind of looked at policy and look at solutions to problems and applied policy solutions to those problems. And I've done that throughout this race. I think that we've gotten off path with a lot of candidates that try to either scare voters or they try to impress you with bragging about themselves. And I just don't think that that's useful. I think that the American public is tired of seeing that. And I think that there was a day before in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, where politicians were a bit more responsive, where they used to answer questions, where they used to have to give real policy answers. And we've gotten away from that. And I realize that the voters will choose that if that's the only option they're given. But I wanted to give you a third option, and that is to give you real policy answers and solutions. I've had experience. I'm not going to say that I'm the most experienced politician here. I have worked for Senator Kit Bond and John Ashcroft in the past. So I've got some experience working in DC, working in the district offices as well, and dealing with case issues or what we call casework, dealing with constituent requests and problems they've had with getting things done in the government. I've always enjoyed solving those problems. And that was several years ago, but I would consider myself a Washington outsider. I think that, but I'm very proud of that fact. I think it's an important thing to be. I don't think that what we need to keep doing is reelecting experienced politicians. They see their time in office. Sorry, am I
I think we're
running out
on
of time?
time. Yep. And
Okay.
no time. We are out of
Yes.
it for your reply.
Sorry.
We have plenty of questions though, and again, you'll have that 2-minute closing,
Sure.
so there'll
Thank
be
you very
time
much.
to introduce yourself a little bit more. But
Sure.
now we're going to switch to our other candidate, Micah Beebe. Please, same question. Introduce yourself and tell us what qualifies you to represent District 5, the residents in Congress.
Well, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Micah Beebe, and I grew up here in Kansas City. This is where I was born and raised, and I've spent the majority of my life here in this district. My dad was a cab driver, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom and homeschooled 4 of us kids. And so, I mean, this is my community. This is my home, and I'll tell you when. It would be an absolute honor to represent my home. And I think that as far as what qualifies me to run for this position, I come from the real estate industry. I've been in real estate for the last 14 years on the residential side and the commercial side of the business. And I know what it takes to run a business in order to work with people and get them to come together in order to get things done. Because if you don't work with other people and you can't come to an understanding between the two of you, you're not going to get anything done. And as a broker, you're not going to either. So I've got a drive and a tenacity to find solutions to problems. And I think that's the kind of mindset of a congressman that can help them be really successful in Washington, is someone who can bring people together and can solve problems. And so I think those are some key strengths that I do bring to the table. And also, I think it's really important that when you look at this district spanning into 15 counties from Kansas City clear to Jefferson City and Osage counties, I think it's important that we have a candidate nominated on the Republican side of the ticket that is from Kansas City. And I think Brett and I, the two of us, it's great that you have the two of us here tonight, because I think we're the only 2 Kansas City candidates on the Republican side.
You know what? I think you're out of time, but you're actually leading into the next question. So let me go ahead and read it, and then we'll let you perhaps maybe go first on this one, because we did on the other. As the result of recent redistricting by the Missouri legislature, Kansas City has been split between the new districts for 4, 5, and 6. District 5 was previously considered more of an urban district. Now, in addition to parts of Kansas City, it includes rural areas all the way to Jefferson City. If elected to Congress, how would you represent such a wide-ranging group of residents?
Yeah, great question. Well, one of the things that I've mentioned, I mean, when I went in front of the Missouri Farm Bureau, this is one question, of course, that they would ask too, is how are you going to represent the rural parts of the district and our farmers and ranchers? And one thing that I had suggested that I would certainly do if elected is I want to form a group or a board of our farmers and ranchers in our rural communities to make sure that I am listening to those key stakeholders in the district of when we're looking at legislation and we're looking at farm legislation. I want direct input from those people that legislation is going to impact the most. And so I think the critical part of being a member of Congress is, are you going to be a person who is going to listen to the people? And that is one thing that you can certainly count on me for, is that whether we disagree or agree on many things, it doesn't matter. I think that it's important that an elected official goes into the district, into every part of that district, and listens to the people. What are the key concerns that you have? What are things that you would like to see happen and like to see done? And I want to hear that, and I want to know what that is, so that way I can more effectively do the job and represent the people well. And then when it comes to, we talked about the rural side of things. Now, when we go to the city side of things, I mean, as I said, I grew up in Kansas City. This is my home, and I've got a lot of roots here, a lot of connections here, and so which I believe makes me the best fit to represent us, just being from this city and just knowing it so well, and working with many business leaders in the community, with other brokers and developers and things like that. But anyway, just going into the community and listening to people, I think is it's an overrated or underrated skill. So.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And Brett, kind of the same question,
Sure.
just given that we have just an expanded District 5 now with such a wide variety of residents, at least in terms of their demographics. How would you represent?
I think that it's really important that we understand, first of all, that having a bigger district and having a diverse district is not necessarily a weakness. I think that's a really good thing. And I think that that we've got to be able to
when my husband and I first met through a dating website, we discovered
we've got to be
not
able to
much
listen
longer
to
after that that we had
I'm hearing
younger
some
siblings the
feedback
same
here.
age.
Is that
I, female 22 at the time, and my husband and
sorry
him,
about
male
that.
26, both had
Okay.
siblings that were the exact same age. We
All right.
introduced
We'll hold
ourselves
on
to
to
each
question.
other.
Do we know
Our
what this
then
is?
17-year-old siblings decided to date each other. With a 2-hour
It's
driving gap
Anitra.
between the two of
Anitra,
them, they
you need
had a
to
lot of
mute.
problems. After they both graduated, they decided to move in together after many protests from us.
Stephanie,
Scott
just
sat
put
down and
her
explained they needed to
in
be
the
sure
waiting
at the
room.
ripe old age of 18 that living.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead and
just jump back
restart.
into it.
Stephanie, can you restart the timer for Brett
Thanks.
here and let him go ahead and
Absolutely,
Sure.
I'll restart.
regroup a little bit and restart the question.
Okay, excellent. So I think that we've got to recognize that diversity is a strength, I think, for the district. I don't think it makes the job of the representative, tremendously harder. I think it's something that, as long as we're paying attention and we're using technology, that's a big thing with this. I think to connect with our voters, to connect with the constituents within the district itself. I mean, you've got a rural area that's very large, but there's still a bulk of the population that is within the city. And I think, some of the solutions that I've looked at, and I've gotten these solutions mainly from going out and talking to voters. So just asking different groups, what do you diagnose as the biggest problems that you guys are facing in your lives, like for rural towns and in the city as well. And we based our solutions on that. And I think, but using technology, I've decided that, a lot of people criticize technology in democracy because it gives some misleading information and so forth. It gives an avenue for that. But I think it's something that can be very useful too. One of my opponents had started saying he would answer questions from any Democrat, Republican, whoever that submitted them online on Facebook. And I copied that and I did the same thing. And I think we can reinvigorate our democratic process by doing that. But I'm also going to allow 3 nights a week, 3 hours a night for our constituents to self-schedule meetings with me when I'm in DC, so they can block out schedules and I will have those meetings. I'll hold them. And when I'm home on the weekends, we'll have 3 district offices, probably one in the city, and I will hold alternating business or office hours that are open, so individuals and groups can come in and speak to me. As far as farmers groups and so forth is concerned, I agree with what Mike has said. I don't know that I would do the committee just exactly like that, but I think there's there are several different groups that are already set up, like the Farm Bureau and so forth, that we need to be in close communication with. But I think that the direct interaction with the citizen, I think, is the most important thing that we can do, and I will use technology to do that. But those who can't make it in for office hours or onto Zoom, I will go and make house calls. Those are the people that probably need to be heard the most. So I want to be responsive to everyone. I really believe in what Thomas Jefferson said, that the House of Representatives is representative by people who are representing the passions of the people, and it's got to be something where we're representing you, your individual interests, your individual families, and really it's the views of the public that we're representing in Washington, not our own. And I think it's very important that we stay true to that.
Great, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Sure. I'm sorry for the little delay
Oh,
there.
that's okay. No problem. It happens. It happens.
Things happen. Okay, let's go on to a completely different question. And let's see. I'm a little flexed about how to just keep switching back and forth, because if I ask the same question, then the second person always has the lead time of what the first one. So
Right.
I'm going to go ahead and just throw this one first to Brett then, and we'll just kind of try and do it that way. The
Sure.
American Israel Public Affairs Committee, known as IPAC, supports a strong relationship between the U.S. and Israel. Have you received any support from them? And what is your position on the war between Israel, Gaza, and Hezbollah?
Right. Okay. So I have not received any money from them. I haven't received it. I haven't really received any communication. Um, I am, I am not in favor of being responsive to organizations that are just geared towards supporting some sort of a foreign state. So I think that if we're going to, there are special interests in the U.S. that represent different political interests all the time, and those things are questionable in and of themselves. But I think that they're fully legitimate, justified positions, and they advocate for those. As far as a foreign country is concerned, I think that it's sort of questionable to me the legitimacy of having them push for the interests of a foreign country, and when we're representing the United States people, with the people of the United States. So I'm against I'm sort of against taking that money, because I don't think it's something that can do anything but bias, say, a representative towards something that really is in the national interest of the United States. Now, as far as my position on the issue, I do strongly supporting Israel. I think that we are justified in supporting that cause. We've supported that since the 1950s, or the 1940s rather, when it was founded. And I think there are good reasons for it. And our interests do align with theirs. I think our treaty interests, and our national security interests align with theirs. And that's not because of the position necessarily of IPAC or anyone else, but we have always been aligned with the causes of Israel. And I think we have to remain to do that. However, I do not like to see a world in which a country can bully the United States into taking a position, and expect to continue to get foreign aid when they're not aligning with our interests. And we've got to do a better job of being stronger in what our expectations are as far as their conformity to international standards and war practices that are not inhumane. So I think there's sort of we need to be more of a safeguard there by using our voice and using it very strongly.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Micah, same question concerning IPAC, your relationship to them, if you've ever received any financing from them, and then just generally your position on the war between Israel, Gaza, and Hezbollah.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I have not received any kind of support of any kind from them. So, no, I haven't. I'll say that Israel is a really important ally for the United States, and I think that it's important that we are good friends to Israel. And I think that I never like to see war happen or conflict happen, but when it comes to the country of Iran and what's going on in Iran, I mean, they are the largest state sponsor of terrorism around the world. I think they're a very dangerous regime. I mean, the Ayatollah would constantly chant death to America, that we are the big Satan, and Israel's the little Satan. I mean, it's a regime that hates us, and so and I think that with the actions of the president that he has taken, I mean, you see the response even with the Iranian people that are here in the United States. People are celebrating in the streets. I don't know a lot of Iranians that are truly upset about that, and they're grateful to the president for the actions that he's taken. And I think that because of his actions, that we have that the world is a safer place because of that. And so I am in favor of the actions that the president has taken thus far. I think it was the right thing to do in order to keep the world safe. And I think that Israel certainly has a right to defend themselves when they're constantly under attack.
Okay, thank you. Next question. This is concerning Social Security and the recent report that came out. Social Security funds are predicted to begin running out as soon as 2032. As a member of Congress, what changes would you support to maintain the level of support for the elderly and the disabled? And I'll add a little bit here because I actually did just write about it. It was 2032 is what the date is as a new predictor of when, if nothing shifts, as much as like 22 to 24%, so about a quarter of what people are receiving now, about 60 million people, they would have that much taken out of their benefits that they're receiving right now, unless something is done. Brett, would you like to take that first?
Sure, yeah. So let's understand the history of Social Security. Number one, it was created under the New Deal in the Great Depression. And the idea was that there were farmers and a lot of people who were under the poverty line that ceased to have any income because we had a third of the country that was unemployed. And so the idea was that you would give them a standard, at least amount of minimum compensation so that they would continue to spend money into the economy, and that would keep the economy from sinking lower, right? So and it's consistently kind of held that function. Although, of course, now it's sort of it's a retirement benefit, of course, for the elderly. And so, I think it has to remain to be that. And the only way that you can make it a really solid asset is to keep it so that it's funded by current workers and then it goes out to pay the payments of the retirees. But I also think that you can mix that a bit. So if you start to create, number one, we need to do three things to fix it. Number one is we need to create more of a tendency towards some sort of incentivization for the creation of 401ks and allow and increase the caps so that people can invest more in their own retirements. I think that's number one. Number two is you've got to extend the life of the Social Security Trust Fund by either raising, and this is not a popular statement to make, but either raising slightly the limit on which you can be taxed. So there's a 9.95%, I think, is the payroll tax cap. And it only goes up on the first $125,000 of income. So if you increase that slightly, that will extend it. You're giving more funding so that it sustains the Social Security Trust Fund, and that can extend it out by decades even. And I remember in my lifetime, there have been a few times now where it's been predicted to end already on these same sorts of assessments. And that has been fixed. It's been fixed fairly easily by extending either by revenue projections, redoing revenue projections or whatever. But I think we have to extend it out by raising that cap just slightly. It doesn't make a huge difference to those who are, wealthy earners, but it does make a tremendous difference in the extension of the trust fund. And then we've got to do the one more thing, is that we've got to allow things like these Trump funds. I think that's a fantastic idea, with putting money in with a kid as a child and having it invested over their lifetime. And eventually, they can keep that, either using it for college or they can use it later on. But that's something that they can even save up until retirement, and it grows exponentially over those years. So if we could start giving some benefits to babies when they're born and letting them start saving from birth, it's definitely something that can be used to support retirement later down the road too, or home purchases or whatever. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Micah, same question regarding Social Security funds and the predictions that they're going to run out in terms of being able to make full payments to people, right?
No. Well, I think it's something that our seniors really rely on. And so we need to make sure that is continued to be funded. I think there's obviously some changes that we need to make. I mean, we're facing a massive financial issue in the federal government with how large the deficit is. And if we don't do something drastic in order to change that, we're in real trouble here. And we're getting to the point, we're getting very close to the point of no return. And I think that scares a lot of people on both sides of the aisle. I think both parties see that this is a major, major issue that we need to rectify. And I think one big part of that is the spending that goes on in Washington. And we have too many of our politicians that go to Washington and decide to spend all of our money as taxpayers. And they go a little crazy with that. And I think that if we were able to rein in a lot of that spending, we would be able to afford to take care of the elderly and Social Security and make sure that those things are properly funded and taken care of. And so I think that it's a discipline issue in a lot of ways. I mean, that's not the only problem, but I mean, I think we have a spending and discipline issue in this area. And that if we can get on top of that, I think there's some positive changes that can be made, but it's going to take somebody who really has a plan and can step up to the plate and actually implement that plan.
Okay, thank you very much. And we're going to try and really keep to our timing here. Can everyone see the time?
Yeah, I think I'm.
Yeah.
Scroll past. I see it now. Okay, sure.
We'll keep that going. Okay, next question. How should Congress balance encouraging innovation in artificial intelligence at the same time while protecting privacy, preventing misuse, and ensuring public safety? Micah, do you want to go ahead and start there?
Yeah, I'd love to. So AI is a wonderful invention. It is the wave of the future. And there's some exciting things with AI that are coming, but there's also some very frightening things that are coming out with AI. And I think that the problem is that government usually lags behind on issues like this. And I think this is one area where we do need to step up, and we need to have some legislation that really puts some parameters around AI, that really puts in some guardrails on what we want that to look like. And so, I mean, it's really concerning when you see some of the things that are coming out with AI. There's so many different things that are AI generated that are looking more and more real. And there's a lot of fraud that can come out of that, identity theft that can come out of that. And like you mentioned, privacy issues that can come from that. And, and right now we've got OpenAI and people are plugging pretty much everything. And there's a massive shift from where everyone used to go to Google to ask all of their questions. And now most people are going into their AI program, whichever one that they like to use, and they're punching in everything into that, and they're putting a lot of very personal things in there. And so how is that information being safeguarded? And so I think we really need to catch up on that front. And there are some things that we really do need to put in there, because there are some dangerous things that can come out of this. And so it's pretty concerning, but I'll leave it there for now.
There you go. Thank you. Let's see. Brett, your reply to the same question.
Sure. So I would say this. I think that privacy issues in general are something that we've failed to really address for many years. And the internet already has given access to a lot of our personal information in ways that we don't realize. And I think that the reason that that's happened is because we failed to have a public discussion about it. It's not something where we've really had an open forum where people have been getting feedback or really putting a lot of pressure on their politicians. And I think that you can put into place certain privacy laws, of course, that would impact this, not allowing AI to have certain information like personal identifying information and so forth. But I think that AI it's been sort of confusing because it has enormous implications. It has really practical applications in certain senses. And some of it's been surprising. I mean, for things like people thought really that it would cause a loss of jobs in certain industries that were sort of routine functional types of jobs. but it's turned out to be more applicable really in certain areas like law and like diagnostics and medicine. And that's really kind of incredible. So it's got different applications. It's also extremely central to the competitiveness of the United States with China. China is really leading the edge in AI right now. And the United States has a vested national security interest in catching up and maintaining a lead in that area. Those things can also then be applied into the defense industry, and it's something, and that's very concerning to me. If you're allowing certain targets and so forth in a foreign war to be decided by some sort of artificial intelligence, I think that takes the human element out of it. It doesn't, and it makes war more likely. It makes it easier to fight. It makes it so that we don't have to feel any sort of empathy or sympathy when we're applying to that. And I think that's a real concern too. So I think we need to take it out of the defense industry, in my personal opinion, and we need to have more of a public discussion about common sense regulations that can actually limit what AI is even accessible to have certain information.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate
Sure.
that. Next question, completely new topic. U.S. immigration policy has long been viewed as complex and difficult to navigate for those seeking legal immigration, asylum, or permanent residency. What changes, if any, would you support to improve the immigration system while maintaining border security and ensuring fair and timely processing? Brett, you want to start on this one?
Sure. Yeah, so the immigration law that's currently in effect, it was passed in 1986. That was the last time that we passed any comprehensive immigration reform in this country. And since then, because it's been so politically unfeasible and so polarizing with the American public and with our political parties, they have failed to pass any sort of regulation or any sort of legislation that would have any impact on that law. So it's antiquated, number one, and it's not capable of processing the current number of people coming into the country or the detainees that are detained here, and when they're being processed and in having hearings to see if they can stay here legally. And so what's been left to happen is the presidency has had to implement certain executive orders. These executive orders are designed and they're intended only to regulate what the law is actually interpreting as meaning. So, and effectuate how that it's applied, in the executive branch. But it's turned into something where you're kind of adding regulations to the existing law because there's nothing else to guide its effectiveness. And right now, there in these processes, as far as getting hearings and so forth scheduled, some of these things, because it's like I said, an antiquated process and it's a very cumbersome process. These things have been extended out for years. Some people are waiting over 20 years for a hearing, and being allowed to stay in the United States during that time.
We're going to go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah, we're going to start being a little bit. No, and believe me, I write on immigration, and we could be rolling, and we could go on for days. But we won't. We have 90 seconds. So, Micah, your reply to the same question about just the quandaries and difficulties of immigration reform.
Yeah, well, I think that we have to focus on what is the purpose of our immigration system, and is it something that benefits the United States and enriches the United States? I think it's wonderful that we have so many incredible people from around the world that are so excited to come here, and and I believe in American exceptionalism and that we are the greatest country in the world, and we've built something really amazing here. And we see that all the time with so many folks from around the world that try to come here and they risk everything to come here. I think that's incredible. I think it's important that we have an immigration system for people to come in and that they integrate into America, and that they really, because we are the melting pot of the world, and so, and I think it's important to keep that. And so that way we continue to keep our identity as Americans and what makes this country great. And so what I get concerned about is that I love immigrants and people who come here legally and have respect for our culture and our society, and they want to do things the right way. And I have a lot of respect for that, and I think that's great. But I just think that it's important that we don't lose our national identity in the process. And so I think that's really important.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, next question. A recent opinion piece in the Washington Post suggested that the National Institutes of Health should be abolished and its research replaced with support from private foundations. What is your position on federal support for scientific research? And Micah, do you want to start?
Sure, sure. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a really, I know, I think part of this, what's really hard is the timing and then completely divergent questions. It's very hard. Okay, this was a question based off of a recent opinion piece that was in the Washington Post, and what it professed and proposed was that the National Institutes of Health, which is the federal arm that does all the scientific research,
Yep.
that should be abolished as it exists now, and have all the research that it does, that the federal government basically funds, and be replaced with private foundation money to do that type of work. So what would be your position on federal support for scientific research?
Yeah, wow, that's a very interesting question. I mean, NIH has done some pretty interesting things. I mean, we're hearing about these different labs that NIH has around the world, and in different countries and things like that, and the types of research that they're doing, and these gain of function research that they're doing. And some of these things are very dangerous. I know that you've got some of these the doctors out there who are saying that they need to go into the deep dark recesses of all of these diseases in order to find cut into them and get into the research of them. And I think that's we're going into really dangerous territory when we do that. And so, but the question that you're proposing here is, what kind of funding should the federal government be offering with all of this? And I don't know that we really need to be funding those types of things. I think it's important to have a robust scientific community and a well-funded research community so that we can find different cures and breakthroughs in medicine. I think that's really important. And so when it comes to whether that should be at the federal level or at the private level, that's a good question. I mean, I think that you can probably find some good breakthroughs at the private level, but what kind of accountability is going to come with that? And so I think that's up for more discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Brett, same question.
Sure. Well, the NIH is part of the, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. The NIH is part of course, the Department of Health and Human Services, and that has the largest expenditure in the federal budget. So it's about $2 trillion this year that is overseen by that department. It's one of the arms. Then you have the CDC and lots of different agencies that fall under it. But you've got to understand, I actually completely disagree. I think that we've got to up the federal expenditures on national research for pharmaceuticals, for diseases, for everything. Because if you look at the past, even back from the days of Lyndon Johnson, then Richard Nixon, that really invested in this idea of curing cancer and doing research on those areas that can come up with breakthroughs. And there's been a partnership between the federal government and private investors to create these great initiatives that have solved problems and probably saved millions of lives. That's the reality. And I think that if we take out the federal end of that, if we take out the partnership end, and then just like if we took out the private end of that, right? The private funding. I think that makes it lose a component that's essential to is how successful it's been already. And just like with our private university system, that is the best system in the world because you've got these partnerships from private and public. And I think it's something that we got to do with that. Yeah. Sure. Thanks.
Great answers, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Next question. Sometimes elections are decided by a very small number of votes, yet many eligible citizens choose not to participate. If elected, what would you do to encourage greater civic engagement and voter participation? And how would you help constituents understand that every vote matters? Brett, you want to take that?
Sure. So first of all, I mean, you'd think that that would be obvious because of the closeness of some of these races, but it's not. I think it sort of disenfranchises voters in thinking that it could be decided by just a couple. I'm not quite sure. It's kind of a confusing sort of element of our democracy that people kind of get scared away by that. But the reality is that I think we can encourage it through, like I said earlier in my first question, the answer to the first question. We've got to encourage it more through technologies that allow voters to be involved and to have their voices heard. I think we've got to be more reflective of their interests and of their concerns, and we've got to allow them to be. We've got to be more accessible to them so that they can have conversations with us all the time. I think that's the idea of an interactive democracy that is sort of what the public is looking for. And I think we establish trust in it, though, over a period of time. This is, trust in the federal government in the Congress has gone downhill since the end of the Vietnam War, and it's gone down pretty steadily since then. And in the presidency, in the legislative branch as well. And I think the way that we encourage that sort of rebuilding of that relationship between the public and the Congress is through actions like I just suggested that we can take to bring it to cause more trust to occur between ourselves and them.
I think we're going to have to press our timer right now.
Sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing it. It's a little dark, but
it is a little bit. Yeah, I'm sorry for that. That's what
okay.
I'll maybe give a little wave when it's getting closer as well. Micah, same question. What would be your response about voter engagement, civic participation in general, encouraging that?
Yeah, great question. I think that there's a lot that can be done on that front. I mean, sometimes it is a bit discouraging to see that the low turnouts at the polls, and I would certainly like to see a lot more engagement from the public. But I think what we can do is just voters need to be better informed, better connected, and they need to feel like they're a part of the process. And so I think that as a candidate and especially as an elected official, connecting with people through different events and functions and things like that, but also communication. And this is one thing that I've kind of harped on a lot of folks in my party, is that we need to do a lot better with communicating with the general public and communicating with voters. And I don't think we do a good enough job at the local level, the state level, and the federal level. And so I think it's about communication. And so we need to be communicating a whole lot better than what we do, because you ask the average American, who their representative is, and most people don't know, or the representative from the other side of the state. And most people don't know those things.
Well, and I think that's why we have these forums, which is why we appreciate you participating.
For sure.
Next question. Given that rent, housing prices, and everyday essentials remain at historic highs, exactly which federal policies will you support in the U.S. House to increase the local housing supply and directly lower the cost of living for working families? Brett, why don't you take that one?
Sure. So this is something I've thought a lot about, and I think that it's you constantly hear that the American dream is dead, and that's because there are not nearly as many people who are able to afford to buy into the home or cannot afford to buy homes, and instead are renting, and the rental prices have gone up tremendously. So to increase supply, you've got to cut red tape. That's number one. There have been a lot of restrictions placed on the housing industry since the Great Recession, right? And a lot of those were put in place, of course, to stop some of the fraud that had happened back then and the excessive loans that were going out for these mortgages. But you can start to build more homes by cutting the red tape, number one, and then you've got to stop allowing private or institutional investors from buying up these homes and using them as investments, because that's just taking them out of the supply, and they're making tremendous profits off of it, and people are throwing away their money into rentals. So if you limit those companies or institutional buyers from being able to do that, then I think you're increasing the supply level there, and unless you just allow them to buy these homes, but only if they're actually increasing supply by doing investments into developmental areas, or causing housing developments.
I think we're over time. Yeah. Micah, what would be your reply?
Well, coming from the real estate industry, I enjoy this question. So I think the big thing is that we are experiencing a housing supply shortage, and we need to find ways to increase the housing supply, because when you see an increase in housing supply, you're going to see costs come down. And one of the things that we can also do at the local level is making it cutting through the red tape, because I know in Kansas City in particular, just the regulations with the city of Kansas City increase the costs of a home by about 30 or 40%. And when you're talking about first-time home buyers that can't afford to purchase a home, that's a really big deal. And so I would want to work with our local leaders and our federal partners to find out what we can do at the government level in order to help take away some of those barriers, and so that way we can bring more affordable housing to the people of our state. And so there's certainly things that we can do on that front. But it's just finding ways to allow for these builders and developers to get into the community and build more supply. I mean, that's really the big problem that we're facing right now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to go on to another question. The Safeguard American Voter Eligibility, SAVE Act is what we've learned to call it, would require individuals to provide documentary proof of U.S. citizenship when registering to vote in federal elections. Do you support or oppose the SAVE Act? And please explain your position, including how you believe it would affect both election security and eligible voters' access to the ballot. Micah?
Yeah, the Save America Act, I think, is an issue that the majority of Americans agree with. I think this is an 80-20 issue. And I think that we need to safeguard our elections, and that this is definitely a very bipartisan issue. And I think that poll numbers really show that. I don't think this is controversial, really. But I think that, you need to be a U.S. citizen in order to vote in U.S. elections. I think that that's common sense. And I don't think it's going to hinder anyone or alienate anyone from being able to participate in the process. I mean, you need an ID to basically do anything, or to apply for a job, to buy alcohol, or do a vast many number of things. And so I hope that the Senate can kind of get its act together and pass the Save America Act. I think it's critically important, because people need to have confidence in elections, and they need to be confident that their vote does matter, their voice matters, and this would put safeguards in place to make sure that that is the case.
Okay. Brett, your thoughts on the SAVE Act?
Yeah, I'm going to make this a short answer. So I do believe, I want to state up front that I do believe that our elections do have integrity, and I've always believed that, and I think I feel very strongly that it is that we do observe laws, and that there is not a tremendous amount of fraud. What I would say, though, is that this act is sort of common sense. I agree with Micah on that. I think that there should be no real complaints about having to show or prove identity and citizenship in order to vote in an election. And so I support it for that purpose. I do not want that to sound like, though, that I don't have confidence in U.S. elections. I think everybody should. American democracy is premised on that fact that we do have a very healthy democratic system, and I think that we should stay very firm in supporting that and believing that. There's no reason to really doubt it, but I do think that something like this can only make it stronger.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Members of Congress represent diverse communities with differing priorities. If elected, which specific methods will you use to communicate with your constituents, gather their input, and keep them informed about your work in Congress?
Sure.
What?
Well, sure. Well, as I said earlier, I want to use technologies for that purpose. I think that you can use technologies for things that are not misleading to the public as far as sharing false information and so forth. That's been a constant criticism of Facebook and other social media realms recently. And you can use that instead to have interactive discussions, or you can use technology like Zoom to have these sorts of forums. And I would do that a lot. I think from DC, because you can do things that used to you would have to travel for a month to get home, to do in person, and you can do that stuff instantly online. I think that's an incredible use of technology towards the democratic process, and we've got to constantly be reaching out to constituents and to groups, farming groups, whatever, to get their input. So I would go, I would have those 3 nights a week where I would have self-scheduled individual discussions with constituents or with groups that want to talk to me, and then I would make house calls when I'm home. I think that's important, for any request, and it doesn't really matter what it's about, but to get input, and then have open forum or open office hours in my district offices as well. I would do that a lot, and then of course accepting any invitations to attend different social events and so forth where they want to give input. That happens a lot as well for congressmen and for senators, and I've certainly taken part in those scheduling processes in the past. So that's what I would do.
Okay, thank you very much. Micah, same question, just how you would engage with constituents and gather their input, such things like that.
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, the thing to keep in mind is that you need to go where the attention really is. And so how do voters want to communicate? How do they want to stay informed? And so also I think a newsletter is something, a robust newsletter, on a very regular basis is something that is a great way to keep voters informed. I think keeping in touch with voters on really just every avenue that we have at our disposal, across different social media platforms. I think through short videos as well, and then obviously meeting in person and doing town halls. I know some members of Congress are not crazy about town halls because when they come home, they might get beat up a little bit from the voters. But I think it's important, whether it's good or bad, for members of Congress to continue to do those, because that's where you're going to hear from voters directly. And are they happy with the job that you're doing? Are they not? And maybe that's the reason why the approval rating for Congress is as low as it is. I mean, it's incredibly low. And I think it's because so many of our members of Congress, they don't show up in the most simplest of ways, and they don't get that face time with the voters. And so if I'm get elected to Congress, I mean, that's not something that I'm going to shy away from. I think it's really important.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate your replies. Next question. Affordability is a major concern for many Americans. What do you believe Congress can do to help lower the cost of living for working families, seniors, and others who face rising costs for housing, food, health care, and other necessities? Micah?
Yeah, great question. Affordability is certainly something that's been on my mind a lot. And, I think the one thing that people really think about, or maybe it's their first thought, or one of them anyway, is what are they paying at the pump? What do our gas prices look like? And and that's one thing that I've learned a long time ago, is that in one form or fashion, we're all kind of in the energy business and in the oil and gas business because we're all affected by it. It impacts our grocery bill. It impacts, transportation, getting to and from work, how our goods are transported. And so I think really exploring every avenue of how can we decrease our energy costs. And I think that goes to the president's policies on opening up every avenue that we have at our disposal and making sure that in a responsible way, where we're caring for our environment, but also utilizing the resources that we have at our disposal. So I think those are really important things, because it also impacts our farmers in a really big way, and the cost of fertilizers and things like that. And so the oil and gas industry, and then the energy sector as a whole, is a really important one to really help bring down some of those costs.
Okay, thank you. And Brett, your reply about affordability and just lowering the cost of living for working families, seniors, and others?
Sure. So I think you bring down costs now by number one. Let's talk about energy. I think that it is coming down because there's been an increase in supply since in prices have been dropping since there's been some resolution of this issue in Iran, and of course speculation and so forth drives up those prices depending on what the outlook is of the investors and so forth. But I think in other areas like we were talking about with housing, you have to increase supply. So if you're increasing supply of new homes, that keeps the prices from skyrocketing as they have over several years. For drugs and seniors, one of the things that is interesting about our system is that we allow for these patents to go into play to bring up prices, but that causes innovation and an incentive for pharmaceutical development and so forth. The rest of the world's maybe cheaper because they're getting those benefits from us after we spend the money on those patents and the higher prices. But we can bring that down some by either limiting the amount of time that we're allowing the patents to last for, or what have you. But we can certainly increase supply by allowing even foreign competitors in the pharmaceutical industry to release certain generic drugs, that kind of thing. So those are some areas where you could really drop it. But mainly, it's been a supply chain shock, and there's been some real inefficiencies that have not recovered since the end of the pandemic in the supply chain and supply. And so getting those sort of fundamentally getting those efficiencies placed back in, getting them functioning more effectively. And that's happening slowly over several years, but I think we're going to get back there fairly soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Next question. Many voters are concerned about the influence of money in politics, including the role of dark money and large political donations. What reforms, if any, would you support to increase transparency and strengthen public confidence that elected officials are accountable to voters rather than major donors? Brett?
Sure. I think one thing that I've noticed is that you've got to, in a sense, uh, you've got to have it so that campaigns must report every campaign employee they've got, every consultant that they're using in Washington D.C. I think a lot of those things are not disclosed, and I think that there's an enormous influence on elections from behind the scenes actors that are sort of legally allowed, but not available through the transparency of the certain federal acts that we've got in place now. So you've got to expand those out to cover those types of individuals. You have to keep certain types of organizations from being set up so that they have to be run through the campaigns. I think that's all really important. And then some of this is limited somewhat by some of the recent Supreme Court decisions that have been made, Citizens United and others, where it's sort of allowed PACs to run sort of the aggressive operations for a campaign without any coordination with the campaign. But really, I think the American people just have to hold us to a higher standard and expect their elected officials to remain transparent with them on what is being coordinated for their campaign and what isn't. Some of those things are independent, but I don't think they all are. I think they're set up in order to look that way, but they're really not. So I think we've got to put in place certain forms that would make that impossible and create greater transparency. The exact answers to those questions, I think it's hard to say. I think you'd have to see what's coming through Congress, but I certainly support anything that would help.
Okay, thank you. Micah, same question.
Yeah, I think that it's really important that we have full transparency in every one of these campaigns, and we know exactly who is donating to these campaigns, and what are they, what these PACs are getting, and where the money is coming from. And so I just think that we need overall better transparency on those issues, because I think that people find ways to kind of skirt around the rules that we do have. And so I think that if we have rules in place that really reinforce the idea of just the spirit of transparency, and that we know where those funds are coming from. And so I think that we could be a little bit better with some of our rules on how open we are about those things. And so specifically when it comes to some of these other groups, and not just the candidates in their own campaigns. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, another question that also comes from some more recent media. Okay, on Saturday, the New York Times published an article about voters using artificial intelligence to help them make decisions about whom to vote for. What measures would you support to limit AI's influence in politics? Micah?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I had not heard about that particular story, so that's really interesting. I think this goes back to our previous conversation about AI and kind of instituting some of those guardrails. It's how much is AI influencing people, and especially influencing our kids and young people as well. And there's some very disturbing things that are coming out, as I mentioned previously. And so I think it's the government. We need to get ahead of the curve on this one and really implement some of those rules for what AI can and can't do, because you have a computer who is answering life-altering questions for people right now, and some people out there are just like, oh, okay, that's what it thinks I should do. This is my friend, and so I'm going to go do that, and that's highly concerning. And so it's how are these algorithms being made up, and what can we do on the legislative level in order to protect people in that area. So I think it's something that we really need to do a lot more work on. I think it's something that we really need to focus on. It's certainly something that I would want to focus on in Congress, and just instituting some safeguards.
Thank you. Brett, same question. The use of AI's influence in politics.
Yeah, I think AI can have some really good applications and some bad applications. And what we have to understand is that AI is pulling its information from online, from all the resources it's got available to it. Sometimes that can be confusing. For instance, if you ask it where I live now, if I live in the 5th congressional district, it says yes, because I live in the current one. But the new one, if you ask if I live in the new one, it says yes, but it's not. It's actually 2 blocks off or 3 blocks off. So see, it's relying on various different websites that are looking at that answer that question, but it's not giving the answer that's applicable to the question I'm asking, right? Just about the new district or whatever. So it's it can be very misguiding in certain senses, and I think it is something that's a little bit concerning, because you can ask it a question about a candidate, where do they stand on X, Y, or Z, and it may say something that it's relying on what somebody else said about you instead of what you said about yourself or whatever. So that can draw the wrong conclusions. But I think it's going to have to get better, and I think it will get better. It will improve over time, but it's hard to regulate that, I think, because it does have some very good applications as well. I think it's something that will sort of resolve with time. I don't know about legislative action and intervening in that area. I'm not necessarily for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, good answer. It was an interesting article, I will say.
Sure.
It pretty much just interviewed people who had used AI to make some of their choices, and then kind of explain what had occurred for different people. The last question, and this is kind of open-ended here. What question do you wish that you had been asked this evening, and how would you have answered it? So let's see. Brett, do you want to go first on that one?
I'm not sure if I want to go for it. No, it's fine. I'll do it. Let's
first.
see. What question? I would say, I'd like to have been asked a question about rural hospitals or healthcare. I think that's important, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I think rural hospitals can be reopened, and this kind of goes to healthcare in general. But I think it's a major and one of the most important topics, especially in rural areas, but also in the cities, for getting higher standards of care and so forth, especially with veterans. Veterans, I think we've got to create something on the model of Medicare, where I would call it Vets Care, where they get covered with the same sort of options and so forth, and that it brings back local demand, because they could get local hospitals to provide care, local doctors to provide care, whereas now They're required to go to faraway hospitals in the larger cities to get care from hospitals that have very diverse or very divergent levels of care. So quality of care is a lot different in those hospitals, and you can create more demand at the local level. A lot of our vets live outside of the U.S. or outside of outside of the cities, so they're in the rural areas, and they and there is demand there. And I think you also get rid of a 1973 law that it keeps doctors from owning hospitals. That's number two. And then, of course, yeah, and then allowing association health plans for small businesses, farmers to pool together to buy into HMOs and PPOs. That creates more demand, and that would allow these hospitals not only to stop closing but to reopen. I think that's an important answer to a question I would have liked to have been asked. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Micah, your reply to that. What's a question you wish you would have been asked, a topic that you wanted to have brought up this evening?
Yeah. Well, I think Brett kind of stole it from me. No, because I mean, the rural healthcare is a really big deal, and that's something that I mean, I'm sure that's why Brett brought it up too. Is that this is something that we've been hearing a lot from voters across the district. It's certainly a really big deal because we're seeing these rural hospitals shut down, and if you're in a rural area and you lose your hospital that's closest to you, you're talking about if you need emergency services, you're going to be an hour away from the nearest hospital, maybe 2 hours away from an emergency room for urgent care if you have something very serious going on. And so I think that's a really big deal. I mean, there has been some funding that has been brought in order to help some of these hospitals, which is something that I've brought up with some of these voters that I've spoken with about this issue, and they just said, Micah, we did receive a little bit of assistance, but honestly, it's not enough to deal with what we're looking at. And so I think Senator Hawley has attempted to tackle this issue, and I saw recently he was talking about this and bringing in more funding. But and I will mention too, my wife is a hospital pharmacist in Independence, and so taking care of our folks in the medical industry and folks in hospitals, that is something near and dear to my heart. And sorry, I see I'm out of time. I could keep going.
Yeah, no, I think actually you might have a little, oh, now you are. Yeah, it's tricky. And actually another good segue here because we're ready for our closing remarks. And on the closing remarks, you have a full 2 minutes, which probably will feel glorious at this point. So closing remarks from each of you. Let's see. And I wanted to just, personally thank both of you for taking the time this evening, because I do realize it is somewhat stressful. You don't know what questions you're going to be asked, and it's always hard to do things over a Zoom call and try and listen to things and then also be looking at a timer at the same time. But you both have been wonderful candidates here, and I would join the league from just thanking your participation, because it is very, very important that people have this opportunity to listen to the candidates, and you've offered that for us. So,
well, thank you, Mary. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
It's very important. I was a longtime reporter. This is everything. I mean, it's really good. You just need people to participate in civic duties and civic responsibilities, and that's what you're doing, stepping up in a really, really big way. So 2 minutes, closing remarks. Brett, go ahead.
Sure. So I want to thank the League of Women's Voters. You guys have played a very important role in our democracy for a long time. As I recall, you've put on some of the presidential debates as well, and I think that's really important. There's been a connection with the public, and I'm happy to be here today. And I would always participate in any forum like this that you hold. So I believe, like I said earlier, a little bit earlier, that Thomas Jefferson said that the House of Representatives is there to represent the passions of the people, and I recognize that people, and that's why it serves 2-year terms. That's why all money bills originate there, because it's closer to the people, right? And your elected representatives are there to do your work, to be responsive to your needs, to be responsive to your problems and solving those, and advancing those local causes at the federal level. And I am absolutely dedicated to doing that. I think it's incredibly important that you have elected officials that have that in mind. It's not, listen, there are two types of people that go into positions like this. I am someone who's always gone into a position, whether I have authority, uh, with the idea that I can use it to impact people's lives to make them better, and that's always been the driving force behind it. You also have certain people that go into it because they want the perks that come along with the job. I think that there are people running in this election that do that, that are in the race for that reason, and it's really sad when I see that. But I don't think that they, and you'll notice that the ideas that they espouse are not ideas that have real policy behind it. It's more about scaring you or about bragging about themselves, and that's not ever a good hint whenever you're looking at somebody to see if they're really a viable candidate that should represent you. I'm here to tell you that I will represent you in Washington, D.C. with zeal. I will represent you with vigor. I will always represent your interests, and I will not let you down. You will hear me speak to you with honesty, and I realize that trust is something that must be earned. It is not something that's given that you receive freely. But I will always show you respect. I will always, and I will work hard to earn your trust, and I will represent your interests in Washington. You will always have an access point to me, either through what I was talking about with the Zoom, in self-scheduled conferences, whether it's me coming home and doing things like those roundtable discussions and so forth that we were talking about earlier. But I will always be here and be accessible to you, and I will work every single day and every single hour to ensure that that happens, that I'm representing only your interests. They will go above my own because I really believe that at the end of the day, that's what matters. And of course, term limits. I will serve 3 terms, and I will accomplish more in that time than some people have been able to in 24. But those are the important parts. I think the cornerstones of our democracy, and I'm set to uphold them, and I will represent you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Mm-hmm. Micah, your closing remarks in 2 minutes.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I just want to thank the League of Women Voters of Kansas City for organizing tonight. And I want to thank everyone that tuned in because, engaging in this process is exactly what democracy looks like. So my name is Micah Beebe. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a businessman, and I'm a neighbor right here in this community. And I'm running for Congress because I believe that the people in Missouri's 5th District, whether you're in Kansas City or Independence or in a small town or rural community that stretches across this district, you deserve a representative who actually knows you, who listens to you, and who fights for you. And look, we may not agree on everything or every issue, but I'll make you this promise. I'm always going to show up. I'll always listen, and I'll always put this district first. Not a party, not a donor, not a talking point out of Washington. What I've heard from families across the district is pretty consistent. The cost of living is squeezing people. Rural health care is failing our communities. And people want a congressman who will answer the phone and get to work, not one who goes to Washington and forgets where they came from, and that's why I'm running, not for the title, not for the office, but because I genuinely believe that our best days are ahead of us. And if we have the right people making the right decisions, I'm committed to being one of those people. I'm asking for your trust. I'm asking for your vote and the chance to serve. Thank you very much. And you can find more information about me at bbforcongress.com and explore what I'm all about. And I've also got an email address listed there. I've got a phone number that you can call or text me if you want to. And so I just want to make myself available. And you can also see upcoming events and things that our campaign is having. And I'd love to meet you on the campaign trail. So thank you so much for having me tonight.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you both candidates. And I'm going to turn things back over to Anitra.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Do we have Anitra to come back on? Well, perhaps not. I will just read it. We just wanted to thank the audience and for your interest in the August 4th election. A recording of this forum will be available on the League's website, and that's League of Women Voters KC, but done all out as a lwvkc.org. Please take a moment to share our forums on your Facebook, Nextdoor, and other social media channels. We would love to have the broader reach through your networks. And remember, for voting and candidate information, go ahead and still visit the same website, of the League. It's lwvkc.org and vote411.org. Thank you so much and good night.
Thanks very much.
I got demoted.